would be open to purchasing some cookies from him, and he said that his family, you put your phone number on here and his family will deliver them.
Oh, wow.
Second quick announcement, much less important. If you have not picked up your ballots yet, please go on over DOE Way where people are supposed to go over there to pick up your ballots so that we can get you set up for the elections for our endorsement today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you everybody for coming. We're going to jump right into our candidate forum. So if I can get the candidates to please come up and take a seat at the front. Our forum today is being moderated by Cohen, who is the vice chair of the Santa Clara County Democratic Party. So Jean, you want to?
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here. This is a really exciting race in the city of San Jose, and it's a very important one. And we have some prepared questions for the candidates tonight. Is there a timekeeper? Okay, excellent. We're going to have, I'm just going to go over the format for tonight. We're going to have 2-minute introductions from each candidate. Then we're going to have the 9 prepared questions, and you each get 1 minute to respond to that. And then we'll take some questions from the audience, and then there'll be closing statements again for another 2 minutes each. And I'm just going to rotate David, Jamal, Huy, and you'll start, whoever went first will go second next from that sequential order, okay? So we're ready to get started? Great. So we'll start with David Cohen. You have 2 minutes for an introduction.
All right, good evening, everybody. Thanks for being here tonight. I've been in District 4 for 22 years, raised my family there, lived and worked in the district, and it's a really important place to me, and that's why I've spent those 22 years volunteering in the community. As a leader as the chair of the San Jose Library Commission, I opened the Berryessa Library when it was renovated and when rebuilt in 2003, I think it was, 2004. And I advocated to the city to keep our libraries open as an important resource for our students. A few years later, I joined the Berryessa School Board, and I've been leading many initiatives in that school district. We've started language immersion programs in Chinese and Mandarin, and we're starting Vietnamese and Spanish next year. I work to get solar in all of our schools. I work to make sure our schools are more environmentally friendly. I preserved our music programs during the recession, so we're the only school district still offering music education down to 3rd grade in Santa Clara County. I worked very hard to make sure we kept our science camp availability for all of our students when that was at risk in our district. I was a leader in getting a parcel tax and bond passed in our district to bring more revenue into our schools. I partnered with the Santa Clara Unified School District when they were advocating to the state to rezone the property up at Agnews, and I was there to lobby the legislators to get that property rezoned and sold to the district at a reasonable price to get a K-12 school built that's now being built on that property, and it's a very good thing for all the new development in North San Jose. I worked on a task force to get a park designed and built in my neighborhood, and then after that was done, I partnered with Ciuncil on the city council to get a new sidewalk built to make sure that we had a safe access to that park. So I've been doing a lot of things in the community. I also worked really hard to make sure that our teachers and staff had great pay raises. We've had 27% increases of pay for our staff over the last 5 years, which is one of the best in Santa Clara County, if not the best. That's why I'm supported by the California School Employees Association, our Teamsters 150 that represents our maintenance employees, and many other important members of our district who work in education. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jamal Khan, and I was not born in District 4. Instead, I moved to District 4 when I was 4 months old. And that's where I grew up. I did my K-12 education in public schools right there in the district, in the neighborhood, including Independence High School, where I graduated as a valedictorian. And then I attended the University of California, Berkeley, where I completed a triple major and a minor within 4 years and graduated with high honors. And then I went to Harvard Law School. I have worked for Catherine Cortez Masto, who became the first Latina U.S. Senator in American history. I've also worked for Nancy Pelosi, Kamala Harris, Sam Liccardo, and the White House during the Obama administration. I've spent some time outside of the district working on progressive causes, but I came home. And when I came home, in light of the experiences that I had, I remember thinking, who is the council member who represents my district? And I found out that the council member was a Republican. And I thought, that's a little strange. And I saw that there were two other council members representing other districts who basically declined to register as Republicans again in the aftermath of the inauguration, whereas the incumbent in District 4 continued to remain that way until it appears last year. And I think that the district is a great place to grow up in. It's a great place to go to school in, to raise a family in. But there are some issues that have become of great concern to me in recent years that seem to have gotten worse. And it wasn't that way when I was a little kid growing up. And so that's a big part of why I'm running, to make a positive difference and to give back to the community that raised me. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Huy Tran, and I am running to represent District 4 on the San Jose City Council. First off, let me wish each and every one of you a very blessed new year here, because the Lunar New Year just began this past Saturday, and may the new year bring you good fortune, great health, and fond memories. Now, our region, Santa Clara County, is going to be transformed over the next decade. As we look out the windows, as we drive home from work, enjoy the views because it's not going to stay the same. Now, this is going to be particularly true for District 4, as we welcome in Google, BART, new companies, new residents. These changes are not something that I believe we should fight. I think we should embrace them. But our obligation as we navigate this transformation is to ensure that the benefits of our growth and the benefits of our development reach all corners of our community. Now, that is not what has been happening in San Jose. Homelessness has gone up 42% since 2017. The cost of living has skyrocketed so much that a family of 4 making up to $94,000 is considered low income. Despite knowing these conditions, our council has not focused on how to take care of its people. Rather, our council has focused on how to increase the profit margins of developers. Now, we need to build, I'm not fighting that. But the decisions that we're seeing is that we are giving up the resources of our city to increase profit margins of developers whose focus is on building the kind of luxury apartments and condos that will cost you $3,000 a month for a 1-bedroom unit. That is out of reach for the vast majority of the people who live in our city. It is out of reach for the vast majority of people who live in our region. That's why I'm running. I'm running because we need to change the priorities of our council to focus on people, not profits. I believe we need to win this seat here, to remove one of the last remaining Republicans on the council and change its priorities towards more progressive values. Thank you.
We have 1 minute. Do you support zoning changes to preserve mobile home parks as a way to protect existing affordable housing? What is one concrete action you will take on mobile home parks?
Well, the quick answer is yes, and obviously in San Jose, as we were just talking about, it's really important that we have a wide range of affordability options for people for different types of housing, and mobile home parks are an important part of that. So I support zoning the mobile home communities so that they stay mobile home communities. A concrete action is for certain mobile home parks that have not yet been protected, that we should be working to make long-term zoning decisions in those areas to keep them safe and secure. I also would like to work with those mobile home communities to figure out how to get the resources in order to help them purchase the land under their mobile home community, turn them into communities that are owned by the mobile home residents. That's a really important feature because as long as another corporation or someone else owns that land, they're at the whims of those landowners. And so we as a city can help facilitate that kind of resident-owned property for mobile home communities.
Of stress and panic that they were under when they were afraid that they could all be evicted. It was emblematic of a larger crisis in affordable housing in San Jose and also in District 4. And one thing that we've seen in the area is that, you know, you have these massive rent increases that have happened over the years, and what they've shown is that there have actually been bigger rent increases for lower income tenants than there have been for higher income tenants. So that's been a very troubling trend, and it's been seen on the east side and elsewhere in the city. And so I absolutely support some of these changes that will help these residents of these mobile homes feel more secure.
I want to actually make it very clear what's happening right now around mobile home parks. Right? There is immense economic pressure to convert that land into high density. Now, I don't oppose high density, I actually think it's necessary. But mobile home parks are a unique institution. For what you can get in a mobile home park, you're spending $200,000, $300,000 to get you 3 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms. Outside of that, in our district, a home will cost you $1 million, $1.1 million. So absolutely, we must preserve these park spaces. And the way to protect these park spaces, including rezoning, is to organize the residents, which is actually what I've been doing over at West Winds. I've gone over there because people are afraid. In the time that the information has been released about the potential closure of the park, people are trying to fire sale their homes, they're panicking, they're trying to figure out what to do. And I tell folks, the way to protect your park is to organize. So I've been working with the residents there to create the West Winds Residents Association. And what's happening at West Winds is not just at West Winds. It is a model for what we can do across the city to preserve affordable housing. Thank you.
Why or why not?
Sorry, could you repeat the?
Sure. Do you support closing Reed Hillview Airport in San Jose? Why or why not?
I think when you look at, I think one of the big benefits of living in District 4 is the fact that, you know, we have essentially a world-class airport in Minetta, which is within driving distance. And what I think that we're on the right track in terms of expanding that airport and making it so that it continues to have more flights nationally and internationally. And I also support changing the light rail system so that you can access the airport through the light rail system. And so I think that is the best approach to take, so that we have an existing airport that works very well, and that should be the primary means for any kind of air travel in and out of San Jose. That's what I support.
And this is actually tied into the issues of development density, building density. So the reason why we need to preserve mobile home park spaces is because we have other options where we can build. Reed Hillview is one of those options. Now, San Jose International is a growing airport. It can serve many needs, and Reed Hillview has been a supportive secondary option, but we actually already have a backup airport in Morgan Hill that can provide the exact same services, that can provide the same support for San Jose International. So what we can do with that land is turn it into dense housing, so we can actually increase the housing stock here in San Jose and better serve the needs of our people. So that's where we actually should look at how we can look at the land we have available and turn it towards the uses and the purposes that will solve the crisis that we face today.
About Reed Hillview Airport. I have a friend who's a manager there and tells me a lot about the uses of the airport, but also understand the concerns of the community around that airport. And there's a lot of issues with people who live near that airport and the pollution from the planes and the noise pollution and other things that happen there. And it's also a really good spot for development of density. We have a light rail line that's going to be built down Capitol. It'll be really important to have housing near there. Having said that, there are a lot of uses of that property that we're going to have to make sure we find alternatives for. And the airport in San Martin is another location. It's a little far for some of the needs. We have emergency systems that use Reed Hillview for helicopter and other needs during emergency situations. We also have San Jose State's aviation program that is out of Reed Hillview. So we're going to have to make sure that we work with the users of Reed Hillview and discuss the long-term goals of that airport. So I haven't made up my mind about what I think about Reed Hillview, but I think that there's really valid concerns on both sides on that issue. And I think we should continue to have this conversation.
How do you view the North San Jose area development policy in regards to transportation? Do you support the Charcot Overpass project? Why or why not?
The North San Jose development, as it currently stands, is about 2 decades old with very little progress to show for it. So I actually believe that it is time for us to take a look at how we envision the use of that land along North 1st Street and what kind of communities that we can build out there. I mean, one of the best examples that I can point to as to how this is an outdated plan that needs to be updated is the Charcot flyover. This is a road that was planned to be built back in 1994. This road was supposed to connect on the west, Charcot, over 880 with Orchard Oakland Road on the east. Now, since then, with nothing happening for 25 years, a community has been built there. Neighborhoods, a school, and yet our incumbent, Plandir, has gone to the community and said, you know what, we have the money, we're gonna build the road now, and we're gonna take down a piece of your school with it. This is why we cannot go back to just the old plans when we know that things have grown up in the meantime. We have to reassess how we can reuse this land and envision it for strength. And also too, we need to make sure that we're using this opportunity to build on our public transit options so that people actually can get in and out without having to get in the cars.
Topic because the North San Jose development is one of the big issues in District 4 and one that I have a lot of thoughts about. We're not doing a good job of building community in North San Jose, and that's one of the primary reasons I'm running. I used to work in an office on North 1st Street, which doesn't exist anymore because housing and soccer fields and other things have been built around those properties. And it's great, we should be using and repurposing those old style developments in North San Jose, but we also need to make sure we build libraries, community centers, parks, resources for people near transit so that they don't have to get in their car to then go do things with their lives when they get home. So we should talk more about that. When I rode my bike from Berryessa to North San Jose in my commute, at that time I was wishing there were another option, and Charcot was supposed to be that option. But then the city agreed, zoned and built a new neighborhood just along Charcot, or just along the east side there of 880, that when I saw it being built, I said, well, the city has now decided not to build the Charcot flyover because they didn't leave space. So now it doesn't make any sense anymore because there's a neighborhood on the north and a school on the south and the road can't fit. So we have to rethink it and come up with a new plan.
Yeah. There are two priorities that you have to keep in mind as a council member. One is thinking about what's best for the city, and the other is thinking about what's best for your specific district. Now, if there is a conflict between those two, you ultimately have to choose what is best for your district, because you have to serve the interests of the people who elected you. That is a very important responsibility. And this Charcot overpass, there's a community there, there's a school there, it's an elementary school. And what the measurable increase in pollution levels, air pollution levels, that these kids are going to be exposed to, who still have, their bodies or minds are still developing, it's too high a price to pay. And it may not even be good for the city in terms of reducing traffic because of the phenomenon of induced demand, where traffic may not actually go down, it may end up staying the same. And so because of that, I cannot support that proposal in its current form.
Using the funds from the recent transportation tax to repave the Capitol corridor in the Outer Rock area.
Support repaving. I mean, the plan in the city is to repave all the streets in San Jose, and so I think that needs to be carried out and followed through on. One of the things that concerned me about the implementation of that was how the decisions were made about what to pave when and in what order, and it seems that there's been some major places with major needs that have been pushed back too late in the process. Our current council member, the answer, he basically gives an answer which is, well, Department of Transportation has a plan, we're following that plan, rather than listening to the concerns of the neighborhoods and bringing the views of the community back to the city to say, there might be a more important project to do first. So we need to be talking more with Department of Transportation to figure that out. But the answer is yes, we should be repaving that corridor as we are, all the corridors in the city. In our district, we have a particular issue, which is that Piedmont Road is probably the worst road in the area. And rather than pave it first, it's now waiting a whole year before it's getting done. And so there's a lot of issues throughout the city as to how we're implementing that funding.
One of the big complaints that I've heard from various voters in the district who I've talked to has been this issue of infrastructure and traffic. And I know that people are saying, well, we have this gas tax and we have this and we have Measure B, all these things. Where are these funds? Well, why are our roads still looking like this? And I know part of it has to do with litigation where there were some funds that were held up, and there are some other, there's like a certain process that takes some time. But it really makes you wonder when you're driving along Piedmont Road and when you're driving on certain other roads, the situation there, and the state that it's in. And I also know that there are residents who feel like they want a greater say with some of the roads. I think, you know, when they talk about how some roads have been repaved and they added a bigger bike lane, but then that reduced the number of drivable lanes from 2 to 1, and how that's kind of increased traffic in the short term, especially during rush hour. And so they felt like they wanted more of a say in it, so that they could at least have more time to adjust to that, instead of kind of, you know, some of the greater hardship that they're facing in the short term because of something that they didn't have a proper say in.
Reporter?
Yeah, it says Capitol Avenue in the Allen Rock area.
Yes, well, one of the issues that we have to deal with is that when Measure D was passed, there was a lot of funding that was approved, and part of the premise was that was to maintain our road infrastructure. So I absolutely believe we should make sure that we keep that promise. But what's important is also how we envision transportation for the future. Right? Maintaining our infrastructure is something we should do, so yes. But we have to look at opportunities for how we can revamp and recreate our public transit system. Right? So when there's opportunities to invest in more busing or light rail, we've got to use those opportunities. If there's an opportunity to turn our ability to get from point A to point B through public transit, let's look at those opportunities. Because right now, we have our infrastructure set up so that cars, you have to take a car no matter where you go in San Jose, no matter what. And then we complain about traffic. Well, guess what? That's because we have no other option, right? So we got to maintain our infrastructure, yes, but we really have to relook at how we transport and move ourselves around the city to create a city of the future.
What specific actions would you take to support renewable energy? Do you support facilitating the connection of residential solar panels to the power grid? And do you support giving homeowners a rebate on solar panel installation?
Absolutely, I support, you know, all these measures for renewable energy, and I know that there is a bill that I think just passed at the state level that mandates it so that every new home has to have some solar panels or some kind of alternative option that's somewhat equivalent. And I absolutely, you know, support these measures, and I think the city has played a strong role in leadership when it, you know, with the new requirement that, you know, new homes, they shouldn't have to use natural gas, for example. And so I think this is an area of incremental progress. And I think it's just amazing. If you look at the future, right, you can have, you can live in a home where you have solar panels powering everything. You have an electric car that you just plug in during, you know, during the nighttime, and then you drive around in the daytime while it's being recharged from energy from the sun, and then you come back and you plug it in, and you basically don't have to pay for gas anymore. So I think we have a very exciting future, and I absolutely support subsidies and other incentives to help us move closer to that.
He, you know, wrote a little poem about the pale blue dot. You know, that's important, right? Because this is our home, this is our planet, it is something that we have to be responsible for. Now, the ways we can do it, of course, is to incentivize, you know, homeowners to build in solar cells and use blind solar energy. So these are good ideas. It's a way for us to, you know, get homeowners themselves to be a part of the solution to climate change. And in terms of what we can do as a city, you know, moving us away from the PG&E power grid, I think, is a great idea because we have seen over the past 2-3 years how incredibly dangerous and how incredibly outdated PG&E infrastructure is. And now we can also use this opportunity to really relook at how we handle energy. I support the city's recent move to the REACH codes, which requires green technology to be incorporated into all new developments. These are the kind of steps that we can do in San Jose that makes us a leader across the country and across the world in terms of climate change and protecting our planet.
This is a really important issue for me, is making sure that our city is the leader in renewable energy and solar. Our city is ranked as one of the sunniest cities in the United States, and yet we have flat roofs across this city without any use on them. Many cities now are building green roofs and making sure that there's requirements for solar on buildings, and we're still approving construction in the city for new buildings without solar on them, and I will push to change that. That's number one. Number two is I will push for our city to invest in upgrading the infrastructure of old buildings. We need to provide incentives and help subsidize putting solar on old buildings, improving the insulation and energy efficiency of old buildings, because it's buildings where a huge amount of energy is wasted in our country, in our city. So that's really important. It's because, and I pushed really hard from the beginning of my time on the school board in Berryessa. I was asking for solar in our district. We pushed really hard. We now have solar in all of our schools. it's for all this reason that this is so important to me, that I'm the candidate that's endorsed by the Sierra Club and by the League of Conservation Voters. Because I will push to make sure that we are the leader in the United States in renewable energy.
Start with you for the next question. How do you balance the need to provide responsive public service?
Now, this is a question that feels like we're fighting over this all the time, right? It feels like, hey, to be responsible fiscally, we have to keep cutting budgets. Well, the result of that is what we see now. The city of San Jose has 600 vacancies across the board in terms of its services. Now, vacancies means these positions are funded, but we can't fill in the positions or keep them filled. And the reason why is because back in 2012, we decided to go the route of austerity. And we took away the vested benefits and the vested earnings of our city employees, the people who actually have made the decision to devote their careers to public service. And what we're seeing now is we are struggling to keep up. Our quality of life is impacted because we refuse to invest in good quality city employees. Now, we do have to be fiscally responsible. I absolutely believe that. But I believe it's also fiscally irresponsible when we take away the investments that create a culture of public service rather than just a simple bureaucracy in our city hall.
To make sure that we're compensating our employees well enough that they want to stay and work here. And that we're finding ways to build affordable housing so that they can afford to live here. Because if they have to commute from hours away, they will eventually find jobs where they live and not come to San Jose. That's really important. As a school board member, I was always the voice on our board to push our budget to try to get our teachers to be the best paid in the county. And it takes a lot of work to get there, but it can be done. During the recession, there are times where we have to make severe budget cuts. We had a recession more than 10 years ago, and we had to make cuts in our district. But I was a board member who stood up and said, I will not support saving money by cutting the health benefits of our classified employees, which was one of the things that many school districts were doing. And as a result, none of our classified employees lost their benefits during that bad budget times. It's really important that we stand up for our employees, even when we have to make tough decisions about those cuts. So I think we can do both. We can make tough decisions during tough times, and we can still support the employees that work for our city.
Well, one of my internships was with the Office of Government Ethics, which is a federal agency that makes rules to ensure that people don't use their public office for private gain. And one of my mentors there said to me, when it comes to public service, it may not be as lucrative as what's in the private sector, but it will always be more interesting. And I remember when I was in middle school, one of my teachers was saying how when he moved into the area, he got a house with a mortgage, and he was teaching for many years. But if he had to do it at that time, he wouldn't be able to afford it because of where housing prices had gone. And that was back when I was in middle school. So you can imagine what it is like right now. And when you have hardworking public teachers, you have this missing middle, right? You have certain people who are working professions that are very important for a community to function. And if they can't afford to live here, if they have to commute from really far away, or they're just trying to make do with some kind of precarious existence here, it affects them, it affects the quality of the work that they can do, and it ultimately affects the entire community. So I think it's very important to find a balance.
Thank you. The Measure A funds to housing for displaced victims of intimate partner violence.
I don't know more to say about it. I mean, yes, we should be spending money on various types of people who need support in our community, and that's one of the areas where people need support, and we should be dedicating some of the money because people in those circumstances are likely to become homeless, and we want to prevent people from becoming homeless, and part of the reason to have Measure A is to provide housing options for people who are in danger of becoming homeless or are currently homeless. So we should be investing in that kind of housing.
I think there was a Santa Clara County point-in-time survey, and what it found was that out of the homeless population in the county, about 2/3 of them said that the primary reason why they were unhoused was because of rent prices. Rent prices were just too high. And so I think, when you have a lot of these folks who, they've had, hundreds of dollars in rent increases over the years, and they just can't afford it anymore, or they're working 2 or 3 jobs, they lose one of those jobs, next thing you know, they're living in their car, or they're living in an RV. Those are the individuals, especially right there on the threshold, who we want to help, because once someone does become homeless, everything becomes much more difficult. And it's kind of just like with healthcare, where the prevention is much cheaper than the cure, right? And so you want to try to do preemptive measures to try to protect people when they're right before they're on the threshold of becoming homeless. So I absolutely support that.
Of this. So I'm actually going to go ahead and use this opportunity to talk about how we address homelessness. Now, one of the issues that we're seeing right now is that people are being forced out of their homes because of growth, because of the rising rents, and because their ability to pay that rent is diminishing. The way we have to work on this and help address this problem is twofold. The first is prevention. In San Jose right now, we actually have a program that's called the Homeless Prevention Program that is 95% successful. We need to be able to expand on support for these kind of programs because preventing a family from going into the streets saves the city thousands of dollars, and the county thousands of dollars per person when they enter on the streets and they require emergency care and they require emergency responses. Then the second way to address homelessness is to provide stability. And this is when we do that by providing housing options, getting people into a place where they can actually address what caused their homelessness in the first place. Because I can tell you this about homelessness. There is no one cause. Whatever it may have caused, mental health, addiction, violence at home, whatever it is, there's no one cause. But there's one thing that we know for sure, which is that whatever caused homelessness does not get better when you live on the streets.
As a member of the City Council what can you do as a member of the City Council to protect community members from police abuse, especially people of color?
One of the biggest I think issues with just law enforcement in general that I've heard from residents, if you call 911, you're not really supposed to do that unless it's an emergency or it's life-threatening. But if you call 311, it can take a really long time for somebody to show up, if they show up at all. And part of that has to do with the pension reform that happened, and certain other measures that have led to a depletion in the police force. And so I think it's very important that we try to build up that police force again and make sure that the cadets who are graduating from the academy are actually staying here and not going elsewhere. And I think it's also important to ensure that we have a police force that reflects the diversity of the communities that they're looking after on the beat. And so I think if you have that greater diversity, automatically I think we'll start to see a level of policing that is just really an improvement in law enforcement and community relations. Because there have been a couple of pretty bad scandals that have happened, and I think that that kind of thing cannot keep happening.
I try to take I'm going to consider myself a progressive, but I also want to understand because in my own family there are police officers. Now, I do believe right off the bat that we have to hold our police officers accountable when they do something wrong, and there can be no protections for that. If they go out and they attack somebody, if they physically assault somebody, there has to be accountability. I will say though that in San Jose, we have a pretty good model. Our police chief, Eddie Garcia, supports sanctuary policies to make sure that we don't violate the trust that we have with immigrant communities. Because the police department here tries to follow community policing model, something that I've seen work very well in the city of Richmond, where crime rates have been reduced dramatically. These are the kind of things that we have to institute to ensure that there is trust built between the communities that our law enforcement is supposed to serve. Now, I also want to make sure that we acknowledge that the work of police officers requires snap judgments, quick decisions. Mistakes can be made, and sometimes those mistakes are incredibly costly. We have to make sure that we create the space that allows officers to make the decisions that they have to serve, but we also have to make sure that we hold accountable officers when they go out, they violate the law, they violate civilities, and they take away the lives that they should not have in the first place.
Several things the city has to do to make sure that they have a well-trained, well-behaved police force. One is to make sure we have, as Jamal said, a police force that reflects the diversity of the community. Number two is to make sure that we have good training for police officers, that they understand what is acceptable and what isn't acceptable. We also have to make sure that the community is better versed on understanding that just like in every segment of our society, there are going to be people in the police department who are also can be badly behaved. And just because we call attention, we hold people accountable, doesn't mean we're saying that the police force is a problem or that police officers are a problem. And police officers should understand that we respect them more by making sure that people who act badly are held accountable. Because the ones who don't act badly will then be better respected in our community by everybody. So it's really important that we support our independent police auditor, and we have a really good process to review what happens in our city and make sure that the council is supportive of independent views of our police department and make sure that people are behaving well.
Huy, we're going to start with you on the next question. And explain why you are the best person to serve the community.
I actually have built a lot of friendships and relationships across the city. And one person in particular ties me most to the district is a friend of mine named Bao Ngo, former secretary for the Various Business Association. I know him because of the work that we've always done within the Vietnamese community. And his home was kind of like our unofficial headquarters for all the organizing that we did with the youth community since I was in San Jose around 2003. Now, the community in District 4 is incredibly diverse, it is incredibly enduring. And part of the reason why I fell in love and settled into District 4 is because we've been able to find people from across the world settled in there, and we've created a community. I mean, if you look at right now what you see in District 4, it is 45% API, 14% Hispanic. It is 2/3 people of color. And that diversity brings the strength of that community. And that's where I believe that we need to continue to reflect that diversity as well.
Experiences in District 4 in my opening statement. I'll just say that for me, the most important, the job, the elected position where it's most important to have strong ties to the community is a city council job. People who are elected to the assembly go to Sacramento, they work as a group to work on state issues. People who work on for example, the county board are representing such a large community and they're working on county-wide issues. But the city council member is the first person that residents turn to when they have an issue. And so having somebody who's lived in that district for a long time, who's raised a family in the district, who knows the schools, who knows the neighborhood, I think is really important. I also worked in North San Jose for 15 years. I built partnerships with the Santa Clara Unified School District, the Orchard School District, working with them on various issues over the years. I was the board member in Berryessa who started the East Side Alliance by joining up with Frank Beal and saying we need to work together as a collaborative in our East Side. Thousands and thousands of East Side students have benefited from the East Side Alliance because it's not just about our neighborhood, but it's about the entire city of San Jose working together for the betterment of our community. So I will continue to bring that collaborative spirit to the City Council.
I went to Independence High School, and I remember when I went there, many of my friends were Chinese, Vietnamese, Filipino, South Asian, Latino, etc. And many of my classmates were on free lunch or reduced price lunch. And I saw the difference that it made for them. The fact that they didn't have to worry about being hungry, that allowed them to focus on other things like studying. And many of them ended up doing very well, academically and later on professionally. And at that time, I never could have predicted that I would one day, through a fellowship program, work for the Food and Nutrition Service, which is the federal agency that administers safety net programs like food stamps and child nutrition. And I was based in child nutrition, and I was working in a division that worked on the National School Lunch Program, the Summer Food Service Program, and so on. And one of the big goals they had was their students who were eligible for free or reduced price lunch, and there are students who are actually receiving that. There's always a gap because sometimes the parents, they don't know about it, or they may not speak English well, so they cannot fill out the form. And so there's always, that goal was always to fill that gap and to improve the lives of those students.
Thank you. I think it's really important to acknowledge the thoughtful and impressive response that we've received from these candidates, because this is, as we started tonight, this is a very important race for San Jose. So let's give the candidates a round of applause. Now we'll take a handful of questions from the audience. There'll be a 1-minute timed response. Is there anybody that would like to question folks?
I'm Rob Means, co-coordinator of the South Bay Progressive Alliance, and I'd like to mention that the South Bay Progressive Alliance this past weekend endorsed Huy Tran for this position. But I have a question about what I think of as the third rail of local politics, which is BART. We've talked about transit and we've talked about roads, but we haven't talked about BART. And the BART borough, 6 miles of BART undergrounded, is estimated to cost nearly $6 billion. Now, on a per mile basis, that's 4 times as much as we spent for the extension from Warm Springs down to Berryessa. On a per mile basis, 4 times as expensive. but I just don't see that the ROI is there, and I haven't seen anybody say anything about maybe we should be looking at that pool of money to take care of improving our transit and to take care of repairing our infrastructure roads. Does anyone want to touch that third rail here?
We'll start with David.
Can I say no? No, I'm just kidding. Look, I'm supportive of lots of different public transit options, and I think BART is an important one because my opinion is that people are unlikely to use transit if they have to transfer from one system to another. And we have a BART system that gets people up the East Bay, and someday we'll be in San Jose. We know that we see trains running right now in testing, and so Milpitas and Berryessa BART will eventually be running, and people will be able to go up to East Bay, and we use it to go to Oakland, we use it to go to Berkeley, we use it to get into San Francisco, and we use it to get to San Francisco Airport even, once it's here. And to really finish that connection, I think it's important to get BART into downtown San Jose, and so I don't think it's an either or on your question. I mean, I think we can invest in a variety of transit options, but it's important to try to minimize the number of connections people have to make to get from point A to point B. I'm going to go to what I think is the third rail of California politics, which is a high-speed rail. I'm also a big supporter of high-speed rail, and I guess I ran out of time, but I can talk about that too. We need a modern infrastructure that matches what Europe and Asia have, and California has not gotten there yet.
I lived in the Boston area for 3 years. I did not have a car. I lived in DC for over 2 years. I did not have a car. I did not need one. It would actually have been more of a hassle for me to have a car than to not have one. So having experienced what it was like to live in those cities and then to come back home and see, well, okay, I'm looking at the Mercury News at the turn of the new year that, well, BART, the extension is going to be delayed well into 2020. And it's just something that, I know that it can be done well because it's been done elsewhere. In New York City, they have a system where you can, if you take the subway, and then within a certain period of time, you can go onto a bus and there's a free transfer. Like it's all just like taken care of. And so there are lots of kind of creative approach that we can take by looking at what other cities have done that have worked well and looking at what is best for our particular circumstances and geography.
The South Bay Progressive Alliance for the endorsement. I want to answer that question in two parts because I think there are two parts of this question. One is, BART's purpose and what use it serves, and then the question is, how do we pay for it? Right? Now, BART does serve a very important purpose because what we need is regional transportation. A quick, fast, efficient way to get us around the Bay Area is crucial because people should not be driving to San Francisco when there's so much public transit available already there that if you want to explore there, you can. If you want to explore the East Bay, we need to expand on those kind of public transits as well. In the South Bay, we need to expand on that public transit as well. BART is important. I do support its completion. How we pay for it is let's get these companies that are going to benefit from having employees live out in the more the suburban areas, and instead of having them drive onto the freeways, creating more congestion, more traffic, we can get these companies like Google, Facebook, to help us invest and create this regional transportation system because they're going to benefit from it immensely when their workers can save time, save effort, and get to work without creating additional congestion on the rest of the Bay Area.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dauber. I'm a professor at Law at Stanford, and I wear a number of other hats on the board of the club here and so forth. So I was actually quite disappointed by the answers on domestic violence. I thought, just to be frank, Huy, that your answer was a little bit flippant when you said that you can't imagine anyone saying no to that. In fact, members of this club have been fighting for this since 2016, and it has finally been proposed to put some of the Measure A money into homelessness for domestic violence victims by Supervisor Chavez just 2 weeks ago. And we don't know if it's actually going to happen. So we don't have to imagine people saying no to it. People have been saying no to it. In fact, our county has less available shelter for domestic violence victims than any of the other counties in the Bay Area. And so I would like to give you all another chance to talk about domestic violence, violence against women, what you can do on those issues as a member of City Council, and how you can support efforts, or if you support efforts like Supervisor Chavez's effort to put in permanent housing as an option for domestic violence victims. And that would of course include LGBT members of the LGBT community, including trans women of color who experience murder at a higher rate than other individuals. I mean, there are many, many issues that we could talk about domestic violence, and so it wasn't appreciative of the sort of everybody is for this, so now I'm going to talk about what I would care about. Okay? So I'd like to hear what you think about that.
I think regarding this issue of domestic violence victims, I think if you look at it, I mean, this is a problem on a global scale. Because globally, the #1 place where women are likely to be killed is in the home. This is true across the whole world. And I think another big issue, I talked about people who may become homeless for various reasons. One big thing is the fact that you have a wife, a mother, where there is some kind of domestic violence taking place, and then she's without a place to stay, and her kids are without a place to stay. And this is a very big concern, and I think that what Cindy Chavez is doing with the county, Santa Clara County, to make it so that you can have these shelters that are available and to make it much more stable and permanent, I think that's something that absolutely we all want to get behind, and to take it very seriously, because it's correlated with a lot of things. When you look at people who end up carrying out mass shootings, for example, there's a strong correlation between that and a record of domestic violence. So it is a very big problem.
I apologize. I certainly didn't want to come off as flippant at all. As an attorney, I've actually represented women in sexual harassment cases. I took on a pro bono case representing a woman who, in her asylum claim to come into the United States. I absolutely believe that we have to care for women, the victims of domestic violence, and again, I apologize. On the Housing Commission itself, we helped craft recommendations to the City Council, and one of them was to create classifications under our anti-displacement strategy that would protect the people who we thought were most vulnerable. And one of the categories that got the most votes, especially for me, was to protect victims of domestic violence. So this is the kind of policy setting that we have to prioritize. When we're talking about how we can address homelessness, there are absolutely subcategories, and we have to make sure that we focus on those. Protecting women who have suffered from violence and are in the streets because of that, vitally important, because when they're on the streets, they are even more vulnerable. So I want to specify again, I apologize, I absolutely did not mean to be flippant. It's an absolutely critical purpose, and I appreciate the second opportunity.
I'm going to say, I'm sorry if it didn't sound like I took the question seriously, but I was very excited that Cindy was pushing for funding for this particular type of housing. As a school board member, we see the effects not just of domestic violence and women, but domestic violence on children in our district. When we see children misbehave, one of the things that I've stood up for is trying to reduce the kind of punishment we give to our kids, because I want to find out what's causing kids to behave the way they behave in school. There's always something causing that. So I have been pushing very hard for our district not to expel students when they misbehave. That's why I was the board member who pushed to hire social workers in every one of our schools in our district. We now have 13 social workers in our school district, one at each school. And anytime a student's misbehaving, I want that student to be talking, and we want to find out what's going on in the home. We want to find out what the problems are that are leading to this behavior, and that may be leading us to have to make some other calls, and our district does that, to make other calls when we learn about things happening in homes. As a city council member, I will be pushing for further investment in social work types of employees in the county, in the city, and ask the county to do the same, to try to reach out and be more responsive to the needs of people in the community. And we should, I'm sorry, it says stop, but we should be investing in housing for victims as well, because many of those women don't have an option, right? They stay in abusive situations because we don't provide housing for them.
Hi, I'm Bill Barrett. I'm currently living in Brookdale, but 2 years ago I sold my house, and I think I must have sold it to a speculator, because it didn't look like anybody moved into it for over a year. They probably made a few little adjustments, and then I'm sure it's been on the market at a much higher price. And it got me to thinking about what is the relative problem? Why are the prices going up? Why are the availability so low? Is it speculation? Is it employers who are just offering jobs without regard to available housing? What are your thoughts on this? And do you know of studies that have been made in San Jose?
But the economy works in ways where the factors will impact prices across the board. But I do want to focus on this specific question that was asked about your home being left vacant. Vacancies is absolutely one of the issues we have to look at. And when I was on the Housing Commission, I, along with another commissioner, Alex Shore, led the fight to actually get the city started to study this issue and start looking at policy solutions. Because the issue with vacancy is this: you can buy a home, and because demand in the Bay Area is so great, you can do absolutely nothing with it, and the value goes up. And we're seeing that over and over right now. A 2017 study showed that there were 11,000 residential vacancies in San Jose. That is more than enough to take care of every person who lives in the street in the city right now. So we need to study this, we need to understand what's causing it, and we need to start looking at crafting policies that will get these back on the market, because this idea I got about creating a tax or about creating incentives for people to put them back on the market came from a broker, came from a real estate manager who said, if you get even a fraction of these on the market, it will have an immediate impact on prices.
Play into the escalating cost of housing. But the fact that we have an escalating cost of housing is what makes it attractive for speculators in our area, right? So we need to build more housing, right? We need to build more affordable housing. And our city has failed miserably on the side of building more affordable housing. It's one of the things I criticize our incumbent for the most. He will take credit for passing an ordinance that says 20% of all housing built has to be affordable. But the credit shouldn't be on passing the ordinance. The credit should be on whether you actually built the affordable housing units the ordinance demanded. And the city has not done that. So we need to be holding the city accountable to make sure we meet those demands. And one of the reasons I'm running for this seat is because I'm raising a family here, and I'm concerned that my kids won't be able to afford to live here once they finish high school and college. They're not going to be able to afford to buy a home in this community. I'm in a school district that had 8,200 students when I joined the school board 14 years ago, and now has 6,700 students. And there's only one school district in the county not experiencing that decline, and the reason for that decline is because people cannot afford to stay here with families. So we have to do something about this problem.
I was puzzled by as I was canvassing, and I'm sure the other candidates have noticed this when they've been knocking on doors, is that you'll go through a neighborhood and you'll come across this random house that's just vacant, and you can tell the windows are boarded up, and it's just like the house on this side of it is $1 million plus house, and same for the house on the other side. And this house looks like it's just like no one's lived here for years. So what's going on with that? And especially when you have like just these skyrocketing housing prices, and it's not clear like, well, whoever bought it, like, what are they doing with it? And I think that I know in Oakland they actually passed an ordinance that like would put fees on houses that were judged to be vacant. And there have been some implementation issues, but I think that's something to keep an eye on. Like if we might want to do something like that in San Jose as well. Or even perhaps, you have the Moms for Housing in Oakland, relaxing some of the requirements for adverse possession. So make sure that these houses don't just stay vacant, but they're actually used productively and for much needed affordable housing.
We have one more question from the audience, and then we'll move to closing statements.
Homeless problem is a real issue. And we've been volunteering feeding homeless for the last several years. Every year we see more people. And actually last Sunday when Jamal joined us to feed 300 people. So I would like to ask you guys, tell me what is the short-term solution and long-term solution, because all this solution you're talking today is going to take X number of years. But those guys who are homeless, they need solution today, not tomorrow or even yesterday. Thank you.
Well, once building transitional housing or temporary housing for people. And the city did have a goal of building 10 of these, what they're calling small homes, tiny home communities around the city. And as of now, the first one is just barely opening, and it's been 3 years. And so I think the biggest hurdle to solving this problem is, and we have Helen's back there, she knows, one of the biggest hurdles to this problem is what the community says when you try to solve the problem. 70% of the voters in this county voted for a bond measure to provide housing. But I think what they were really voting for was, I want you to build housing, but don't build it near me. And you can't do that if 100% of the community says it's not going to be near me, because then you can't build it anywhere. And when I'm walking precincts, the amazing thing I get is people who say, what are you gonna do about homelessness? And they don't want me to tell them I wanna solve it. They want me to tell them I'm gonna do nothing because that's cheaper and they don't believe in actually supporting homeless people. So I think the most important thing we can do in the short term is educate people, is reach out to people, is try to destigmatize homelessness so that people in the community understand that we all are better off if we solve this problem.
Attorney. I also sat on the Housing Commission, and I've been president of a community-based organization. And all of this came after I used to live out of my car. So for me, this issue is very big, very personal. And you know, you're right. There's nothing that we can do for the folks who are here today, because we have over 6,300 homeless people in the city of San Jose, and at any given moment, we can only service at most 10% of them. So the solutions that we have to put on the table to address this crisis right now is everything. That means sanctioned encampments because they have no other place to go. It means RV parking because right now you can see it on Orchard or North First Street. They'll park there anyway. And we need to find places where we can give people the security to take the tools that they're providing right now to survive and connect them with services. Connecting them with support so they have an opportunity to actually turn things around. Because right now, all we can do, if we don't actually put all solutions on the table, we are handicapping ourselves from actually solving the problem and providing support for people who are struggling now.
The endorsement process, and so we'd appreciate if you give her the attention once the gentlemen have completed their comments. And again, let's give them a round of applause for being here tonight. You each get 2 minutes to close, and we'll start with Huy, Jamal, and David.
For the opportunity today, because right now this is a very consequential election. We're not talking about what's happening across the country, though. Of course, that is absolutely vital that we change what's happening across our government right now. But in San Jose itself, we need to see changes as well, because what's going to happen over the next decade will impact everybody in the South Bay. Now, as I've campaigned, I've had two goals. One is absolutely to win and to change the priorities of our council to focus on our people rather than the profits of developers. And the second, though, has been to organize. It is to strengthen the communities that live in our district so that we can continue to have the enduring ability to thrive. That's why when various teachers marched for better pay, I marched with them. That's why when the Orchard School community was organizing itself to push back against the city, forcing on them a road that nobody wanted, I helped them canvass. And that's why right now, I'm actually standing with the residents of the West Winds Mobile Home Park. There, the park owners are trying to say they did nothing wrong. The park operators say they did everything wrong. Well, I'll tell you what. What I tell the people who live at West Winds is when the elephants fight, it is the grass that suffers. It is through organizing that they're going to create a West Winds Residents Association. It is through organizing that we've been able to build support from almost every single elected official surrounding District 4. It is through organizing that we just got the endorsement of the South Bay Progressive Alliance. That's the kind of values that we need to bring into our council. That we strengthen the communities and that we work with the people in those neighborhoods so that we can ensure that all of us are uplifted. And that is the kind of philosophy that is missing right now from the council. What their philosophy has been is trickle-down economics. Cater to the people with money and eventually the rest of us will benefit. But that hasn't worked for us in the past 2 years. That hasn't worked for us in the past century. I ask for your support so that we can bring this council back and focus on what matters the most. It's people. Thank you.
Reading your biography, for the first time in my life, I feel proud of having gone to Independence High School. When I started college, that was when I first got on Facebook, and there was a Facebook group that said, I went to an East Side Union high school, and I made it to a university. When I was at Independence High School, there was a class where we had a theatrical production. And so we went over to a thrift store to buy some costumes for that. And we saw a classmate of ours who was standing in line at the register with her mom. And naturally, we walked over to say hi. And I will never forget the expression on her face. She was smiling, but I could see it in her eyes. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to be anywhere except there, in that store, with us, because of why she was there. When I was on campus in high school, sometimes at lunch, sometimes after school, we would see certain folks who would come onto the campus, and they would rummage around in the trash cans, and they would fill these little plastic bags with, bottles and empty soda cans, so that they could take them somewhere else and get a small reimbursements for a few cents for each one of those containers for them. And the school personnel, they knew that they were there and would do that, and they generally left them alone, because it's like, you know what, they're not causing any disturbances, they're not bothering anybody, just let them do that, and it's good for the environment. And so I saw some of those issues back then, and I know that all of that has gotten even worse now. And a big part of my motivation is, I grew up in District 4. I grew up there. That's my community. I'm a product of that community. That's my home. And the issues that I've noticed in recent years, they seem to be getting worse. And District 4 needs to be represented by someone who's a fighter, who's going to fight for them, who's going to stand up for them, and to take into account everybody who's living there. I'm a centrist Democrat, and so for me, it's about finding the right balance between compassion and fiscal responsibility. And that will be my guiding principle throughout my time if I'm elected as a council member. Thank you.
First, I want to thank the Siicon Valley Democratic Club for putting on this forum, and thanks, Jean, for a great job moderating. You have a great last name. Anyway, in addition to the work I've been doing in the community for the last 20 years, I've also been very active in the Democratic Party, as many as you know. Dating back to 1992, when I worked with Barbara Lee organizing the Oakland United Democratic Campaign headquarters, in the first year of the woman when we elected Dianne Feinstein and Barbara Boxer, spent a lot of time on that campaign working for the Democratic Party. And ever since then, I've been a member of a county central committee and the state central committee. I've been on the county central committee for the last 24 years. And in that role, I have served as Assembly District Chair, as Communications Director for the county party, as a parliamentarian for the county party, as Vice President of several clubs, and I've worked on a lot of campaigns. And because of all that work, I've received the California Democratic Party Regional Directors Award, the Madge Overhouse Volunteer of the Year Award, the Dawn Gem Award, and I'm very proud of the fact that they recognize the work that I've done for the party. And I think it's really important that we continue to build coalition in this county. We have good progressive people elected to office in this county to represent the voice of the working people. I'm proud to be endorsed by the Democratic Party and the Labor Council, but I'm also excited about many of the local people who are supporting my campaign. 4 years ago, members of the community came to me and asked me to run for the seat when it was vacated when Kansan Chu was elected. I spent about 8 months with my family discussing whether it was the right thing for me and my family at that time. And it wasn't the right time for my family, but so I stayed on the school board, and I'm very proud of the things that I've done on the school board in that time. But I've also, as I said, seen the effects of the problems in our county and worry about what the future is for my kids. Worry about whether we can sustain school districts that are shrinking in our county. Worry about whether our teachers, firefighters, police officers, and other workers we need in this county will be able to continue to live in this county. And so when people came to me again and said, our current council member is not listening to us, will you run this time? I couldn't say no this time, and I decided to step up and run for the seat. And I would look forward to having your support. Thank you.
The lovely Jeff is coming around with the box. So please raise your ballot up high so he can see where you are so that you can vote for the person that you want to vote for. Any questions? All right, thank you for your patience. This is an exciting election this time.
Okay. Pen, anybody? Anybody need a pen?
Anybody else with California?
Good.
You sure?
Excuse me.
Are there any ballots outstanding?
Any outstanding ballots? Going once. Going twice. Okay, but everyone else is done other than Jenny who's over there? Okay, so with the exception of the one ballot, we will take.
Okay, so tell me when you started.
Ready.
Okay, so hello, this is Kristen Rivers. The second round of voting, we had 34 ballots cast. 6 were for David Cohen, which was 18%. 5 for Jamal Khan, who was 15%. And 23 was 68% for Huy Tran. So he, congratulations, is the sole endorsed candidate for the Silicon Valley Democratic Club. Thank you.
Thank you.